This week in Arsenal, Gareth Southgate throws Ben White under the bus. Arsenal draw Bayern in the Champions League quarterfinals. Takahiro Tomiyasu signs a contract extension, and a grueling run-in awaits Mikel Arteta's men. Let's get into it.
Maybe we'll have a good surprise for you.
Welcome in to This Week in Arsenal, episode 49. As always, I'm Sham. You can follow me on Twitter at Shamsdale, and I'm joined as ever by the one, the only Sash, who you can follow on Twitter at LT Arsenal. Sash, my friend, how are you doing?
Really good. It's good to do a podcast on a weekend. Normally, it's always in a weekday. We're busy, we're working, we come back and we're doing the podcast. So maybe we're a bit tired, but it's really nice to do it on a weekend, especially on the back of Arsenal being top of the Premier League table, advancing to the quarterfinals of the Champions League. I think days like this don't come very often, and I think we should really just look to enjoy this podcast. So I'm in really high spirits today. How about yourself?
Yeah. I mean, like you said, it's a really good time to be an Arsenal fan, to be talking about Arsenal. I think we had a really good win at Brentford that I don't think we would have won in previous seasons. We overcame Porto in very dramatic fashion. Again, that kind of win is something that I don't think was in our locker even last season. So, even though we're not blowing teams out of the water like we were at the beginning of last month, it still feels like there's some progress being shown, and that's always very exciting. And we have a really great show here for you guys today, and we're going to talk about the Bayern draw. We're going to talk about Tomiyasu's contract extension, and we're going to do a little preview of the run-in that awaits Arsenal over the next several weeks. So if you're watching, if you're listening, please do hit that that like button on the video and comment and subscribe. Hit the bell for notifications. Follow us at the handles you see here. Follow This Week Arsenal at This Week Arsenal on Twitter, and of course, you should also follow and check out the works of our illustrious guest that we have here today to discuss all these subjects with us, and that is Rohan, who you can follow on Twitter, RJ Arsenal Blog. Rohan, my friend, how are you doing, sir?
Oh, I'm doing really good, and even better seeing you two. always good. I think the last time I came on here was, I think it was this season, wasn't it? Earlier on this season.
I think so. Yeah, it's. I think it's been a few months, but yeah, that sounds about right. Sash, do you remember exactly when we had him on?
Sash, you should know.
You kind of have a memory for these things.
Maybe after the United game when Declan Rice scored the win, I think, because he refuses to come on when Arsenal lose matches. He only wants to come on.
That's not true.
I mean, that's fair. That's fair.
You're calling me a coward, Sash.
Rohan, this is not your podcast. Where is your mate? We have a comment.
It's in reference to the weekly live show we do with that I do with Alex on the different nights.
Yeah.
So...
Unfortunately, Gunnar boy, this is not TDK Live. This is TWA Live. Although, I mean, I do just want to say before we get rolling, TDK Live, like I've tuned in a few times now, and it's always a great discussion between you guys. Always a lot of fun. So, yeah, I mean, keep it coming. Honestly, it's a great thing to look forward to over the course of the week. So, you know what? So Sash and I have talked about this previously, but I do want to get your thoughts on the Ben White, Gareth Southgate situation before we move on to other topics. So just, real quickly, what's kind of like your overarching opinion on how that situation was handled, and whether or not we'll ever see Ben White in an England shirt again?
Yeah, I think it's really frustrating because when that news came out, it coincided with Ben White's announcement video of his extension, and I felt that it overshadowed that, which was quite upsetting because the video was a great way to illustrate the impact and what Ben White has given to Arsenal since he signed, and he's had to overcome a lot of adversity. We go all the way back to his debut against Brentford when he was thrown under the bus, where he had a difficult outing, but there were a lot of external mitigating circumstances behind that performance. Where on paper it looked like Ivan Toney completely bullied him, and there were suggestions that he can't play centre back, and he completely answered all those critics. And then he answered all the critics playing at right back, and his consistency playing in arguably the most complex role in the team is a testament to how good of a player he is. And that video was there to just showcase how well he's been doing, but also the type of person he was. And then that has kind of been overshadowed because of Southgate's comment, and he's threw him under the bus. And I think it's really disrespectful. And I don't buy any of the things that he's been saying. There obviously has been a bust up between him and Steve Holland. But to a lot of the big narrative is that Ben White is showing a lack of professionalism, he's showing arrogance. And this is a guy who's been under Marco Bielsa, he's been under Graham Potter, he's been under Mikel Arteta, three coaches who demand such high levels of concentration, focus, and your ability to transmit, to take in information and then transmit it onto the pitch. And he's done that under every single coach. Before he came to Arsenal, he was Brighton's Player of the Year. The season before that, he was Leeds Player of the Year as well. And I find it very difficult to believe things regarding his lack of focus when we've seen the All or Nothing documentary where Carlos Cuesta said Ben White's best ability is his capacity to learn. That completely goes against everything that has been came through the media. And I just think it's a shame. Now, the other thing is people suggesting that Ben White doesn't want to play for England. Of course he wants to play for England. You just have to go back to his call-up, what that meant to him, what that meant to his family. Ben White won't play for Gareth Southgate, but the moment Gareth Southgate is not at England, Ben White will play for England again. He 100% will do. For most players, it's an honour to represent your country. And Ben White, as I've already alluded to, he was. You could see how buzzing he was when he got that call up back when he was at Brighton. So a lot of it is just annoying. But from our perspective, as Arsenal fans, I think we'll be delighted in the sense that it reduces the chances of him obviously picking up an injury, and he's in house and he'll be ready for the running. So yeah, but in general, I was quite disappointed with how it's came across the media, because it's quite clear that there's being lies that have been put out there in big publications as well. So yeah.
I mean, I think too the Harry Redknapp comments, I think, were just ridiculously over the top, and then the Henry Winter article as well, which I feel like Henry Winter kind of has a track record of saying very ignorant things in his writing, which is crazy for a journalist of his following. But yeah, it's the frustrating part isn't that he doesn't get to play for England in the time being. For me personally, the frustrating part is just seeing how people are continuing to talk down on a guy and come to conclusions about the character of White when I'm putting together a video for the channel on Ben White right now, and as I've been researching, it's crazy the number of obstacles that he's had to overcome over the course of his career, right? He dealt with a very debilitating illness as a kid, where if essentially his immune system wasn't fully functional. He was released by Southampton at 16, and then he joined Brighton. He played every single minute of a 46-game championship season under Marcelo Bielsa, which is crazy. That's insane.
Yeah, crazy.
Right. And then, he's played under Graham Potter, and he's played under Arteta, who, we've watched kick guys like Mesut Ozil and Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang out of the club. He's gone from center back to right back when we brought Slate. He's, whatever challenge it has been in his career, he's really risen to it. So to see people calling him a diva and, kind of implying that he's a quitter or, some sort of coward it's really annoying. It's really disappointing. And that's on Southgate. And that, I think, this is kind of the leader that he is.
And the issue is that obviously we can sit here and we can say, oh, I don't really care because it's not involving Arsenal. But Ben White is going to get booed at pretty much every single English ground now because people will look and will take the information that is in front of them. And I can't fault them in that sense because they don't know Ben White as much as what Arsenal fans do. But they'll take what's being written in these publications and they'll take that as a player who has not shown the dedication to represent his country, which is absolute nonsense. And just quickly on one of the article pieces, and what it alluded to was how Steve Holland singled out Ben White after he wasn't able to understand a piece of information. I can't remember what it was exactly. I think it was about Manchester City's play style or something regarding revolving around that. And he singled him out in front of a group. Now, if you're at work and you're in a massive meeting in front of a lot of different people and someone singles you out, are you telling me you're not going to react? Because I certainly would react. It's unprofessional and it's clearly a sign of them not understanding Ben White as a person as well. And this is something that Mikel Arteta, I think, doesn't get enough credit for, is the human aspect of players. And we talk about how good he is tactically, etc. But how he's able to understand each individual and coach them in different ways, because players who have left Arsenal, lots of Pablo Mari as well, for example, who, and there are other players as well, even Guendouzi, they all speak highly of Arteta because of how he is as a person. And clearly they've not done that with Ben White when he was on England duty as well. So, I
also want to add one thing here, and it's that, you sometimes have to look at the history of players, right? You look at Aubameyang and Arteta. Aubameyang had a history even at Dortmund where he would turn a plate. Maybe the way the managers managed it was different, but he did have a discipline problem in the past as well. The same with Guendouzi, where in the past he would cause issues, he would be over emotional. So he's also had a history of problems with coaches. And when Arteta maybe has a falling out with these players, you can at least look at the players' history and go like, okay, these players, they have been a bit problematic in certain situations. So like the players also have to look at themselves in the mirror. But in the case of Ben White, as you guys have spoken, like he's never had a problem with anyone until now. Not a single problem. So you need to be a really terrible manager to have a falling out with Ben White, to piss off a player like that, to piss off a player who wants to play even when he's injured. And your favorite player, Rob Holding, was speaking in an interview that he did earlier this season. I think it was with Michael Timms. And he was speaking about how Ben White, like against Newcastle, I think he had a grade 2 like hamstring tear or something like this. And he still played. Of course, we lost that game. It was a very infamous match. But the fact that this guy will still play even when his body is saying no is testament to, I think, the type of character he is. And for an assistant manager to fire a cheap shot at him like, you don't watch football, and do something like this in front of the whole group, I think it's pretty clear where the fault lies. And I think it's up to Steve Holland and Gareth Southgate to apologize to Ben White, to admit in front of the whole group that what they did was wrong. And then maybe Ben White might reconsider, because you can't shit on someone in front of a whole group and then just because they're in form, call them back. That's not right.
Also Conor Cody, who was in the camp at the time as well, he's came out and he's supported Ben White, and he said how much of a good player he is and how he is an individual. I mean, it's honestly, it's nonsense. Steve Holland, Gareth Southgate, they're both melts.
And the media as well. Because during the World Cup, all the leaks that came out during that time did not speak about what happened, what was reported by the Athletic. They made it look as though Ben White was the villain. He was not getting along with teammates. That's coming from the England camp, all of this stuff, right? So
it is.
He's been completely framed, and fair play to him for actually like not going back, as difficult a decision as it is. Like all of us have our pride, and I think sometimes in life you have to stand up for yourself.
100%. And the point that you just made there, it must have been so difficult for him, because you think of how many times you're able to play for England over the course of a season. It's only 3 occasions max over the course of a season outside of a tournament. So, and a footballer's playing career is not as long as what you would expect in international terms. And then you consider players who are potentially younger, who could come through the ranks, who could be then ahead of you in the pecking order. It's a difficult decision to make. And as long as until he leaves, he's not going to play for Gareth Southgate again, and I fully back him. And then the way they've handled it, I think Southgate said something yesterday in an interview where he talked about something being quite unprofessional or something. It's it's not related to the Ben White scenario, but mate,
it was him being linked to United.
Yeah, but that's it. Yeah, but what you just did the other day is unprofessional. He's such a melt. Honestly, he's so bad of a manager as well. And I can't stand him, honestly. He's such a melt.
He's going to be out in the summer after the Euros. He's going to be on his way anyway. So it's just a matter of time for White to come back.
I disagree on your assessment of Southgate. I think he's a phenomenal manager, and Manchester United would be very, very lucky to have him.
Absolutely.
And they would win everything if they signed him. So please,
the next
Manchester
Fergie.
United, do not sign Gareth Southgate as your next manager.
I was watching the overlap and Ian Wright. So I was watching the overlap and Ian Wright was saying that Southgate has the stature to be a United manager, that when he stands on the touchline, he looks like a United manager. I think even Ian Wright is taking the piss, but doing it in a very professional way.
Love it. Get him in at Old Trafford. Get him in. So funny.
We'll finally win away at Old Trafford.
Yeah, because for me, right, the COVID season doesn't count because there were no. It's like when Man City beat Liverpool. The only time Guardiola's beat Klopp was when there were no fans there. We need to beat United when there are fans there. The last time we did that was, I think, 2008 Adebayor. I don't know if you remember
2006
that.
It was, I think. 2006.
2006. Yes, that's it. Yeah, because I remember my little brother was. Yeah, when he was 1 year old, actually. And it was like the 90th minute winner as well, wasn't it?
It was a very late goal. Fabregas has a dribble and plays.
Yeah. We know.
Good times.
But I mean, Southgate being a melt aside, I do think having White back at the club during the international break will be nice as we prepare for a string of a string of really tough fixtures, and among those are a couple matches against Bayern, who we've been drawn against in the quarterfinals of the Champions League, something that we've not been able to say for 14 years, which is pretty crazy. But yeah, I mean, I just want to get everyone's thoughts here on the Bayern draw and kind of how they feel about it in terms of confidence, right? So Sash, I'll go to you first. When we got drawn against Bayern, where was your mind at?
So when we first got drawn against Bayern, I was very happy, to be honest, because I wanted a big team. Like, bro, what's the point being in the Europa League, playing Slavia Prague, beating them, and then celebrating? Like, it's like, okay, fine, like, yeah, we have to win the games that we play. But Arsenal belong on this European stage where in the quarterfinals, semifinals, we're playing PSG, Real Madrid, Bayern. We're going toe-to-toe with them and beating them, At some point, you have to face this test. And I wanted Arsenal to have a big test because in terms of quality, I think we can beat Bayern. I think we can beat Real Madrid. I think we can beat PSG. I think we can beat any team purely on the basis of quality. But then there is something, as Mourinho said, called football heritage. It's like the history of the team in that competition. And that's something Arsenal don't have. We've never won the Champions League. And in Wenger's last 7 to 8 seasons, we were embarrassingly getting knocked out of the round of 16 to anyone. It could be Bayern, it could be Barca, it could be Milan, it could be Monaco. We were dreadful, right?
Yeah.
And I want Arsenal to, redeem themselves and establish themselves as a team that will turn up in a European night. And I want us to have a special night against Bayern. And before, when we used to play Bayern, Barca's, I used to live in India back then, and I used to stay up till 3 a.m., 3:30 a.m. and watch us get spanked 5-1, and then go get up the next day, go to school. So it was horrible. It was just the worst time to be alive. And I want revenge. I smell blood because I see Bayern. I look at their midfield and I'm like, hey, wait a second. Our midfield is much better than their midfield, like genuinely. I think our defense is better than their defense, right? And yeah, I think the front three is amazing, but I think we have a pretty good front three as well. And I think if you just look at both the teams as a whole, I think it's pretty even. And I think we actually have a really good chance if you look at how we're playing and if you look at how Bayern are playing. So I want revenge. And I think this will be a great opportunity for us. And as Maxwell Lewis here says in the comments, he says last time in the UCL versus Bayern, both teams were completely different. Arsenal coming back for it. Exactly. Like the last time we played against Bayern, our team was so different. We didn't even have a defensive midfielder, like a proper defensive midfielder. Our defense had like Koscielny and Mustafi, guys like this. I like Koscielny; he was a great player for us. But I still think Gabriel Magalhaes and William Saliba, look at their physicality. They're like just, I think, on a different level. And I think we
I'm pretty sure Xhaka was playing center back the last time we played Bayern.
So the last time we played Bayern was 2017. So Xhaka didn't play as a center back, but he was playing in midfield. So in the first leg, we did Xhaka, Coquelin, and Coquelin was really declining at that point. Robin, I remember cutting in and scoring. The second leg, the first half performance was exceptional, but then the second half, we got torn apart. And
Koscielny came off in both games. When it went down, I think the aggregate score when Koscielny was on the pitch was like 2-0 Arsenal, and then when he came off, it was 10-0 Bayern.
But that won't happen today. If we have an injury, Ben White will move to centre back, Tomiyasu will come to right back. So I think this Arsenal team is very different. And if Bayern, they try to come at us like how they did back in the day, they're going to have guys like Martinelli in the transition. I think who's going to be really a big factor for us. So very much looking forward to it. I don't want to go into this tie thinking like, oh God, it's Bayern. I want us to go out there and enjoy it. And that's what I think we will do.
Yeah. Rohan, what do you think?
Yeah, I think, we obviously, some people will be worried about what's happened previously against Bayern Munich, but it's a completely different team under a manager who is, moving forward as opposed to Arsene at the time who was declining. And just I really wanted either Barcelona or Bayern Munich because I wanted to get revenge on one of those two teams. We need to get revenge on them, and it's a really good narrative as well. Arsenal playing against Bayern Munich, what's happened in the past, and you've got Arteta versus Tuchel as well. There's a good little storyline there where I think they faced each other 3 times, and Arteta's won twice and Tuchel's won once. So there's so many good little stories that you can see. You've got Harry Kane coming back as well, and Gabriel versus Harry Kane. That's been a massive mismatch in our favour. Gabriel has been fantastic against Kane, regardless of the goals that he has managed to score against Arsenal as well. And I just look at both teams, and I think, taking into consideration the fact that Bayern Munich won't have any fans in the first leg, I think that's a massive, massive bonus for us. And I think we need to capitalise on that. Try and get this game won in the first leg. And I actually think it's better for us to play at home in the first leg because I think we'll be able to play with more freedom and with more fluidity. Whereas I think if we're playing away from home first, granted, if it goes to extra time and it goes to penalties, you then have a disadvantage if you're playing away from home in the second leg. But I want us to play with that free-flowing way of being able to just go into that first leg and not really worry about being too pragmatic. Arteta's a very pragmatic coach, but he's also a very stubborn coach. He's pragmatic in the sense that he will always adapt to the opposition, but he's stubborn in the sense that it's his principles of play that we won't deviate away from. They're the non-negotiables. And I look at the way Bayern play. There are threats, as Sasha alludes to, in terms of the front line. I think Musiala is a massive danger in this game. That's why I'd want Declan Rice very much on him, particularly in the press, to prevent him from turning and driving forward. And Declan Rice and Musiala, they have came against each other on international duty before when England played Germany, and it was a pretty good matchup between the two. Both had their moments. And I think if Bayern Munich play Tell alongside Kane, that's kind of, It's very similar to the Son Harry Kane dynamic that could work for them. So that's something to be wary of. But where
And
we can hurt
Sane as well, on the
yeah, and
other side.
Sane as well. Yeah, and you've got Alphonso Davies as well, giving you that threat down the wide areas as well. But Bayern Munich, they have a lot of weaknesses. I don't think they deal with. They're not the smoothest in build-up, especially since they've started to favour a partnership of De Ligt and Eric Dyer and Goretzka, who's technically not the most secure footballer out there. He's very much that kind of box crasher, but he's been dropping into left centre back in build-up a lot for Bayern Munich this season. And I'm looking at Arsenal and the way that we've approached teams this season in the press, where it's adapted depending on the opposition. I'm looking at Bayern Munich, and I think we need to go man-to-man against them and to really press them and to make it very difficult for them. And we've got the players across the back line to be able to deal with the front in transition with the likes of Gabriel and Saliba. It is obvious we just have to be wary of certain threats like that Kane and Tell dynamic if they do start him. But I just look at it and I think this is where we want to be. You know, it's obviously a very scary fixture schedule coming up if we do keep progressing and progressing. But you'd rather be in it than not be in it, right? And we have a very good opportunity to showcase our skills and our talents in front of the world against another European giant. I look at this as such a exciting matchup. I didn't want the likes of Atletico or Inter because I felt that's going to be very much a stylistically similar to Porto. Whereas I think those types of team are actually probably our biggest weakness. But a game against a Bayern Munich, I think it actually plays into our strengths where we can really hurt them. And I think we have to respect them because their numbers in terms of the number of chances they've created, they're right up there in Europe still. But what we can do at home with 60,000 fans as well, we can definitely close this game off in the first leg if we're smart and we're efficient as well. Efficiency is going to be key. You know, the big games is always about the boxes. You know, usually tactically there's not loads between the two teams, but it's how efficient you are in the box, and that's what could be really key in this game.
Yeah, no BCMs this against Bayern Munich.
I prefer not to speak.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with both of you guys. Where you know I think people are putting too much emphasis on what happened 7 years ago. Like you guys said, there's one guy who's going to be. I mean, I guess two if you want to include Arteta, but there's one guy who's going to be involved in these matches who wasn't there. Or who was there previously, and that's Thomas Muller. Outside of that, it's a completely different setup for both teams. Like you said, we're very familiar with Kane. There's a pretty good chance that Tuchel decides to overthink things and start Eric Dyer at center back against us, which would be a lot of fun. Muller is a really excellent player going forward, but I think he's kind of past his prime at this point. Definitely not someone who is going to be a problem for us defensively. And then just on top of that, I think Bayern are picking up a few injuries, right? There's I forget the name of the right back that they signed in January, the one that we were kind of interested in, but he picked up an injury.
Sacha Boey.
Yeah, Sacha Boey. So Sacha Boey got an injury. I think Manuel Neuer also left the Germany camp with some sort of muscle problem as well. So those are two things that could really factor into how we play, especially if Neuer is out. I think that's a big thing. And yeah, I just think there's a bunch of matchups that we can exploit all over the pitch, right? I like that Martinelli against Kimmich matchup. Like you said, I think Sash, like you said, like I think our midfield stacks up very well against them. So, while I'm loath to sit here and say we're going to run away with it, we're going to blow them out of the water, I think we absolutely have the capability to beat these guys and advance into the semifinals. And then we'll talk about what happens there. But yeah, I think it's all there for us. And like you guys said, we just have to capitalize in that first leg and, really beat them by a scoreline that's demoralizing for them and, comfortable enough for us where if we don't have our best day at Bayern, we can get away with it.
Yeah, I think there's two things for us that we really need to keep an eye out for. First thing is, I don't want us to get into a shell, when we play. I want us to play with freedom. I want us to play without fear. Playing without fear doesn't mean you're reckless and leave everything open. It's more how you are on the pitch, your body language, the way you use the ball. You're like positive. You want to really go for it, and I want to see that from Arsenal. And the second thing, and this is my only concern, and I saw it a little bit against Porto as well. I think Porto had one of the best tactical performances against Arsenal I've seen this season. They were incredible at the Emirates. Honestly, to restrict Arsenal to that little over 120 minutes, like I know Arsenal were maybe having like playing with a bit of like the handbrake off in the first like 45-60 minutes, but still Porto were exceptional. And even the way they were building up, like it was not like they were just playing through our press, but they would keep the ball, they would work it out wide, and they would play these clip balls out wide, and they were finding a lot of space, especially on Kiwior's side, I felt in the second half. And I'm just a bit worried that we should not give this sort of space to Sane, Tel, as Rohan mentioned, and any of Bayern's like wide players, basically, because they're really quick and they have Harry Kane who will be in the box. So that's the only thing. And also Muller may be making runs off Kane. So I don't know how they're going to set up, but I do think they have the threats to hurt us. So I want us to be like a bit wary. But I would also like to ask both of you a question. And Rohan, maybe you could go with this because you did like a piece on like Arsenal's out of possession work. I was just curious, if you were an opposition manager trying to set up a team against Arsenal, how would you set the team up and what do you think our weaknesses are?
I think that the game against Porto is a very good way of setting up against Arsenal. And last season as well, when Newcastle played us at the Emirates and when Everton beat us at Goodison Park as well, those types of teams, in terms of that mid-block, we have found it difficult to play through them in terms of being able to generate a lot of clear-cut opportunities. I mean, like you alluded to, Porto is set up really well in their mid-block. And it's not a case of where they're sitting deep. Teams who sit deep, there's a narrative that Arsenal can't break that low blocks. That was coming through at the start of the season. That's false. Arsenal play really well against low blocks. It's the teams who have really good physical intensity in the middle of the park, who can match us, who can help retain second balls, because that's what Porto did. I don't think over the past 2 years, when we've had our best 11, our core spine available, nobody has bettered Porto against us in terms of being able to win second balls. The amount of times they would go long, we'd win the first ball, but they would be there to win the second ball and then recycle it back to their goalkeeper and they'd restart. They did that time and time again. And I think, like I alluded to, teams who have a lot of physical intensity and security in the middle of the park, they will do really well against Arsenal. And that's why I was a little bit fearful of coming up against an Inter Milan or an Atletico Madrid right now, because I think you're going to get a very similar type of stylistic matchup. And in terms of in build-up, now, what was frustrating for me in the Porto game was that Porto set up in this kind of like 4-2-3-1/4-5-1 block, right? So we would actually do some really good things where we would provoke them to engage. We'll invite them onto us by staggering our two centre backs. So if Gabriel receives it, then Saliba will drop a little bit deeper to provoke them to come onto us. And then the fullbacks were free, but Saliba, I didn't think had the best game in possession against Porto. I think he showed some nerves, and I think Gabriel did as well, where they weren't able to access the free man. And that's the weakness that we could have exploited in that game. But from Porto's perspective, what they did is that they were very aggressive when they jumped, but they were also they were able to get back into shape in their block quickly. And that's why I allude to teams who have a lot of physical intensity in the middle of the park, who are able to engage, but are also able to squeeze in the middle of the pitch to block off lanes and to effectively force you to go out wide. But at the same time, I think whilst that's probably the best way teams could set up against Arsenal, I think there are things that we can do so much better. Like if you look back at the build-up to our goal against Porto, it's the Jorginho ball over the top to stretch their back line, to push them deeper. And then that creates a disconnect between their midfield and their defensive line, where you can then win the second ball. And then their structure is not as assured in that moment because of that ball that stretched them. You can then create something really quickly. And we didn't do that enough. We didn't play the ball over the top enough. We weren't direct enough. So I think that's something that we can counter against those types of teams who do well against us. So I'd say teams who have a lot of physical intensity in the middle of the park, who set up in this mid-block, that engage well, they block off lanes, and they're quick to collapse on either side when you push it to Saka and Martinelli. So that's the best way, I'd say, to set up against Arsenal.
Yeah, I think the point you made about even Arsenal, the way we played, like to try to get Porto, like try to bait them into pressing us,
Yeah,
moving the ball. I really like that point because I read this quote, I think it was from Guardiola, where he says, we move the ball to move the opposition. It's
yeah.
like, that's such a fascinating quote. Like when you explain it, that really, like,
It's like bait. It's just like saying, right, come on to us now. We're playing slightly dangerous passes from our perspective to engage you, but then you've got to show that confidence and security to be able to play out from it. And I just think there was so much onus on Gabriel and Saliba to do that, and they weren't able to do it consistently. I mean, Gabriel's long balls in that game were one of the worst that I've seen this season, and
Yeah.
So
yeah. I also think that if we had Martinelli that day, it would have been
100%.
different, because I think Porto were even more brave because that threat in behind was not there. So they were really like brave to come at us. So I think if Martinelli can get fit and healthy, I think he's the key to beating Bayern. But Sham, how do you see this? Like, where do you think Arsenal could be got at if, let's say, you're Thomas Tuchel? What will you look to do?
I mean, I think I would just try to exploit the space in behind with the wide forwards, right? Where this isn't to say that, White is bad defensively. I actually think quite the opposite. And I'm interested to see who we play at left back. It'll probably be Kivior. Maybe it'll be Tomiyasu. But depending on the space that we... Please no.
Zinchenko versus Kane 1v1.
Not this game. If we're ever up against Atletico or Inter, then maybe, but not this game. Yeah, I just think you want to try to put, Sane and Gnabry and Tel in those 1v1 situations against White, against Kivior, and just make them make decisions and cause chaos that way. I think Musiala also will be a factor, but I mean, I can imagine Rice is probably going to be on him. And then Muller, I think, Muller is the Raumdeuter, right? So his whole thing is going to be finding those pockets of space in the final third where he can get into and cause issues. And I think we may need to put someone on Muller, or at least do a good job of, suffocating those spaces that he could hurt us from. That's another thing to keep in mind. But it's really tricky, right? Because I think, like Rohan said, if you are not a Porto or an Inter or Atletico, and you don't set up in this very dogged fashion where you're playing very conservatively and you're getting the challenges in, and you're just being very generally ungiving when the other team is on the ball, right? It's so much trickier for us. Whereas Bayern, I think, are just going to maybe aim to overpower us offensively, and I just think that's something that we'll be able to cope with way better than we did against Porto. It's just a better matchup for us. So, kind of with that in mind, it's very tricky to imagine any single, glaring weakness that Arsenal has. So that's what I would, kind of proffer as something that we could do there. Where just, get into those 1v1 situations out wide against White and against Kivior. Force some chaotic situations, some decisions to be made there, and then see what space develops for Kane and Muller and Musiala to exploit.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think the point you made that, like, about Porto, I think very few teams will actually play the way Porto does, as like Rohan mentioned. Like, they press us when they have to, but they're so quick to getting back, like really well drilled. And it's like a lot of preparation has gone for Porto just into this match. And they have players who will sacrifice, who know that they're maybe not as good as the Arsenal players. So they will do that. Whereas with Bayern, I think it's more like, hey, we also have good players. We can also play like good football. So I think there'll be more space. And I think Arsenal are a team that will do very well when there is space to exploit. So yeah, really looking forward to this one.
Yeah, it's I'm really excited for it, right? Because like you guys have both said, this is where we want to be. These are the big games that we want to feature in, and it's kind of it kind of reminds me of that trade off where the games that you want to be in are the ones that scare you the most, right? Like when I was watching the Porto game, we went to that penalty shootout. and I had to drive my fiance to something right as the penalty shootout started, and I very willingly got in the car and I said, I'm just gonna, I'm just gonna find out what happened when I get out of the car. And then I caved about 2 minutes in and had her read out the updates to me. But it's just one of those things where it's terrifying, but that's such a good thing because that means the stakes are higher. The
Exactly.
rewards are greater, and it's just lovely to be back in that situation. Um, and that is kind of just a small piece of this overall run-in that we find ourselves approaching now, right? Where we're going to come out of the international break and we're going to play City, and then I think we host Luton at home. Do we play Bayern right after City, or do we play Bayern after Luton?
No, I think it's we play Luton, then we've got Brighton,
Then
and then
Brighton.
Bayern, and then Aston Villa, and then Bayern
Okay.
again.
Yeah. So just not an easy list of fixtures. Like after the second Bayern game, we've got, this isn't in order, but we've got Spurs and Wolves and Chelsea, and whatever
United.
semifinals we come
United.
up against.
We've got
Yeah.
United as well. We've got
Yeah.
Man United as well. Yeah.
Oh shit, United. Yeah,
Yeah.
United at Old Trafford. Spurs is going to be away as well.
Yeah.
And then of course, if we get through to the semifinals, it'll be either City or Real Madrid, which is probably the two hardest teams in in the tournament. It's going to be absolutely insane. Every game is going to be a final, and I just kind of want to get both your thoughts as to what the key things we have to do to be successful in the run-in are. So, Rohan, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think the key is squad management. that's the
Yeah.
main thing. The number of games, the volume, and I've mentioned it many times where January to the business end of the season, that's where you need to make sure that you have a core of players who are going to allow you to maintain consistency week in, week out, to then give you the platform to go hard at the end. And we've done that. We've done that period where, we've had 13 to 14 players who have been playing consistently. We've had a strong level of team selection continuity that wasn't necessarily there post 2024, where actually before this year started, going all the way back to the game against FC Nuremberg to I think it was Forest this year, where we had made a change in the starting 11 in every single game. We had not kept the same 11, and that's really good in the sense that we were able to give ourselves a strong platform, picking up points well, but also being able to rotate players accordingly as well. But now we've started to play a certain selection of players who have been playing weekly. Granted, we've been taking them off, and I think Arteta deserves a lot of credit there, where we've been winning, 6-0 against Sheffield United, 5-0 against Burnley, 5-0 against West Ham. We've been able to take players off. But now we are not going to get what we want at the end of the season if it's just those crop of players. They are not going to be able to play this many games consistently over the course of 3-4 days. And that's why I've alluded to that. Fabio Vieira, Zinchenko, Gabriel Jesus, Thomas Partey, Jurriën Timber, Tomiyasu, those guys are just as important.
Smith Rowe as well.
Smith Rowe as well. Sorry, yeah, Smith Rowe. Those, in other words, the players who have not been here available weekly are going to be just as important as the starting 11. Or that crop of 13 to 14 players, because they're going to need to be able to come in. They're going to have to be kept warm so that they're ready to make an impact when necessary, where we pick up injuries or we have fatigue that's crippling that's crippling certain players. We need to be able to use these guys. And I actually think you already alluded to it. The wide areas, that's something where Bayern Munich can definitely hurt us. I've maintained that I don't think we have very strong fullbacks 1v1 out wide in isolation. I don't think Ben White's strong enough there. I don't think Kivior's strong enough there. Zinchenko's definitely not strong enough there. And this is why Tomiyasu is one of our most important players from now to the end of the season, because his versatility, he is our most versatile defender. He's the only defender who can play in any position across the back line. He's an excellent finisher option as well. You go all the way back to last season when we played Manchester United, where Ben White was getting roasted by Rashford. He came off at half-time. Tomiyasu came off. He locked him off, completely locked him off. And he's done that many times this season when he was available as well. And actually, before he picked up that second injury, I think it was against Wolves where he picked it up. He was, for me, one of our unsung heroes of the season in terms of what he was able to come in depending on the game state. And I look at him as one of our strongest. He's our best 1v1 fullback out wide alongside Julian Timber. I'm not going to expect loads from Timber given the injury he's had, but Tomiyasu is so important because of that ability to close the game off. Kivior as well. Kivior deserves so much credit for what he's been doing post 2024. And that's down to Arteta in the sense that he's been able to give him the platform to flourish, where he's been moving him wider as opposed to asking him to come inside, which he's not comfortable in doing so. But Kivior 1v1 out wide, if the distance is big and he's up against a winger, he will get ripped to pieces as well. He's not the strongest in those situations. Kivior and White are actually really good wide when the distances are close and they've got players within close proximity because they're both 6 foot, they've got long legs, they can wrap around and it helps them in those scenarios. But against tricky wingers where they're in isolation, they're not the strongest. And that's why I think Tomiyasu will be so key. So it's all on Mikel Arteta. We know how good he is tactically, but he has to manage the squad, so it's a case of the squad needs to be available. And he's got to rotate accordingly. We've got games against, like you alluded to, Luton, Bournemouth. We don't need to start the same players in those games. We need to use our squad. And that's going to dictate the outcome. So I've got no doubt that Arteta will be ready tactically for any matchup. The worry I have is, can he manage the squad? And that's what we'll have to see.
Yep. I think that's absolutely right, by the way. I think the rotation and the management of squad minutes and kind of preserving some players for more critical moments, I think that is absolutely the key. It's funny, not a lot of people seem to think that, by the way. I feel like every time I say the word rotation, people start thinking that I want to start Cedric against Bayern because White would have played a few days before. That's not what I'm saying, for anyone who thinks that. It's just, I think Saka is a great example, right? Because Team News and Ticks just came out a little while ago and said that Saka has been nursing an injury for a very long time, right? To the point where England themselves decided to send him home as a precaution. We didn't even have to ask them to send him back, which I think kind of indicates the worry around that injury. Although, according to Tina, he'll also be available for for City. So I think Saka is an excellent example because that is one of our key players. I think him and Rice and Saliba are probably 3 guys in the team who are basically impossible to replace fully. But with Saka, as important as he is, we're going to have to find those moments where we need to put him on the bench and let him put his feet up, right? Luton is a game that I'm looking at as a potential opportunity to do that. Obviously, he'll get some rest over the next week and change. But, if we're up big against Brighton, I want to take Saka off first, right? If we somehow go 4-0 up against Bayern at home, I want Saka off the pitch, right? And, I think a lot of people are kind of under the impression that you can just play your best players week in, week out, every 3 days, 90 plus minutes for 2 months straight. And, if anything happens, it's bad luck and that's it. I think there's just, there's a little bit more nuance and intelligence that goes into managing the squad there that Arteta, frankly, has not been terribly convincing at over his tenure. It's one of his few weaknesses, but that's been something that I've wanted to see a lot of improvement in. I will say over the course of the season, before the injuries started piling up, he was switching up teams between weeks, right? We were seeing different lineups based on the opponents we were up against. So I do want to give him credit there, but this is that make or break time in the season where he really has to get it right. So, fingers crossed he can do it. I think that's something that he is capable of, and we'll see what happens. But Sash, what's your take on kind of the thing that Arteta absolutely has to get right, or the team has to get right, in order for us to end this season with a Premier League title and or a Champions League title?
Yeah, so actually, when we were planning this podcast, one of the topics that I wanted to discuss was this topic of squad management till the end of the season and not repeating the mistakes we made last season. So both of you have already spoken about that in great detail. So I don't really have too much to add there. But the one thing I would like to add is that, we might lose a game, okay? We might lose a game. Maybe we away to Wolves, we drop 2 points. It's possible. It's the Premier League. Teams are really good, and to go on a run of like 10 games now in a row, beating all these teams, it is a really big ask. I'm not saying we cannot do it, but I'm saying it's a big ask, and there's always a chance that you will fall a bit somewhere. The key is, when you fall, make sure you immediately pick yourselves back up and go into the next one. Because, if you see Arsenal's last season, what actually cost us was two bad, like, not winning streaks. One was in February, when we lost to Man City. We dropped points against Brentford, and to begin with, we lost at Goodison Park. And then in April, it started with Anfield. Then we dropped points against West Ham, then against Southampton at home, and then against City. So if you see, Arsenal's defeats just came in two patches last season. And that's what ended up costing us, right? So I think the key is, if you lose a game or you drop points in a game, and from a mental point of view, we need to put that behind us and then on to the next one. That's really important, because fixtures are coming thick and fast. You can't lose one and feel sorry for yourself. And you also cannot like take too much pressure. You just need to express yourself and enjoy it. And I think that's what Arteta should tell the players, like, enjoy it. Because last season, much as my brother Rohan abused Rob Holding a lot towards the end for how bad he was, I think there was a bit more to it than just Rob Holding. So against Southampton side, who are 18th, I think we can beat them, even having Sham as the left back and myself as the right back. Or maybe we can beat them having one of us on the pitch. It's possible. Like, you can beat them with 10 men. Like, Southampton are not good. You're playing at the Emirates, you can beat them. And Rob Holding is still a professional footballer who's been part of 2 FA Cup winning teams in the
For God's sake.
Let's first of all put some respect on his name.
Why are you bringing that back up?
I mean, I'm bringing the FA Cups back. That's like, it's a good memory. That
but also, I think the point that you mentioned, we tend to lose games in clusters under Arteta. So 2 seasons ago, it was obviously, like you alluded to, Brentford, Chelsea, Man City at the start of the season. Then middle of the season, we lost to Brighton, Southampton, and Crystal Palace. Then last season, it was the points we dropped against Brentford, Man City, Everton, like you alluded to. Then it was Southampton, West Ham, Liverpool. So it's like in groups of 3. That can't happen. It can't happen. Like you,
exactly.
The ability to react to moments of adversity is what defines you as a player. When it's all going really well, that's great. But when you have moments of adversity, that's when you need to be able to react at your best. And actually, I'd say this team has done that in many different ways throughout the course of last season and this season, but they've not done it in crunch time. That's the key. They've not done it in crunch time. And this is where I can't give you an opinion on what's going to happen, because I've got no idea. I've got nothing there that suggests that they can do it in that period, because I do have confidence that this team is different, but I don't know how they're going to be able to react to pressure when it's really, really tough, and we know how good this team is, but external factors can still drive what happens, and that can dictate how good you are of a player as well. So that's what's really going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, and I will also say this. I think there's some positive signs in that regard this season, because you look at some of the games last season that we lost, like example, City at home. We're finding ways, I think, to overcome some obstacles. Even winning at Goodison Park, as bad as Everton are, I still think that's huge for Arsenal, because we haven't beaten them since 2017. So I think we have shown that, okay, we're overcoming some obstacles. Maybe we're creating other obstacles, because at times the form has been a bit patchy this season, which is okay. But I think we're now we're going into the crunch time. So I think we have it in our hands. So it's up to us now to, apply those finishing touches. And before I finish, I just want to ask you a question, Rohan, because I don't know if it's OCD, because you mentioned a lot of clusters that we had of defeats. I have a quiz question for you. So you mentioned in 2021 how we lost the first 3 games. And then you spoke about those cluster of defeats in April, Palace, Southampton, that cluster of defeats. You missed one in between November to December. Can you remember them?
Between what, for last season or the season before?
So 2021, 2022.
2021, 2022. In
December. November to December, yeah. Well, it was 4 matches. We won one in the middle, but we still lost 3.
Did I mention Everton?
Yeah, Everton were one of them.
2021, 2022. It was so Everton. So I've said Everton. You gotta give me a bit of time.
Everton, you're right, but the 2 other defeats happened before Everton, like.
Man United. Man United.
And.
Should know this. I'll definitely know it if I wasn't on camera. Man United, because we lost 3-2 that game. That was that weird Smith Rowe goal.
Yes. And I'll give you another clue. Before the United game, we played against Newcastle and we won 2-0.
Yeah, we won. I know what it was now. I know what it was, of course. Oh, it was stupid. Arteta and Klopp confrontation.
Yes.
Yeah.
And not forget stupid Arteta and Klopp. It was Nuno Tavares who, for the first time, showed me what he's capable of.
Honestly, though, go watch that first half back. He was immense in the first half against Salah. Yeah. So in the first, Sambi Lokonga and Nuno Tavares was so good in the first half, and in the second half, it just that Arteta moment. I do think that had a massive part in what happened, because actually before that moment, the game was very even. There was nothing between them. And then the moment that happened, it was Aaron Ramsdale versus Liverpool. It was literally just shot after shot of, oh my God, he's keeping us in this. And then Nuno Tavares in the second half, he dribbles past Trent. I'm like, go on, Nuno, go on. I was like, oh no, where are you going? And then the next thing I see Ben White on the floor, Jota scored. Oh, and then he does it again after as well. Yeah. And then he took him off, I remember. Then he took him off. Oh my God.
I was just thinking, like, look how much we have evolved since then, because we had Lacazette and Aubameyang leading the line. Odegaard was on the bench. Can you believe it?
Smith Rowe was playing. Yeah, it was a 4-2-4. Yeah. So it was Sambi Lokonga and Thomas Partey. It was White, Saliba, Tomiyasu. Not Saliba, sorry. White, Gabriel, Tomiyasu. I can't remember who played left back. It probably was... No, it was Tavares, obviously. It was Tavares. And then Sambi Lokonga partying. It was Smith Rowe, Aubameyang, Lacazette, and Saka.
Yeah.
And Aubameyang and Lacazette, honestly, you'd get nothing from them in those games. You get absolutely nothing from them.
Like, it's even when Aubameyang was free, like Fabinho just comes and like crunches him. You know, like there's no physical like presence. There's no like ball retention.
And this is where I think people underappreciate Havertz. You know, think what we're doing against Liverpool now, and how we're able to. We've got a guy who Havertz. You know, I think we're all big fans of Havertz. That's something that we've all been massive fans of him. And what he did to Konate, what he did to Van Dijk, he's just so awkward, and he's physically immense. You know, he doesn't get tired. He runs the channels. He pins centre backs. He facilitates. We've lacked that so much. You know, Aubameyang, as good as what he was as a goal scorer, etc., and you can't take that away from him. But in those games, he was just a bystander in the games. Away from home. It was just, and Lacazette was one of the most overrated Arsenal players. Oh no, I'm not going to go into it. No.
Because he was a downgrade on Giroud. I will stand by that. By the way, but that's why, you know, I still want us to sign Osimhen in the summer, because even if guys like Havertz and Osimhen don't put the ball in the back of the net, it is still a rough day at the office for the center backs 9 times out of 10. Right, because those guys will run you ragged. They'll run the channels. They are going to bully you physically. They are going to make life very, very awkward for you, which is not things that Lacazette and Aubameyang did when they weren't on their A game.
Yeah, and while we're on the topic of strikers, we actually had a question. So someone said, Rohan, I just replied to your tweet with Gyökeres pushing the defense and Havertz at the end of cutbacks. Does that work next season? We need some of Rohan's scouting knowledge now to come out.
Oh no! Oh, but you know me, I don't get to watch loads of football outside the Prem these days. But Gyökeres, okay, I watched him a bit. Yes, I think it was against Portugal. I can't really give an opinion on him. But to reply to that tweet, yeah. So I mentioned how statistically Arsenal have created the most chances from cutbacks this season out of any other side. And I've alluded to how cutbacks have been a key staple in our play for a number of years under Arteta now. And we've been improving season after season after season, where we have the structure in place where once Saka or Martinelli or whoever's out wide receives the ball, their gravity as they're moving forward alongside the guy in the middle of the pit, in the middle of the box, pushing that back line deeper, it creates a disconnect between the midfield and defensive line, and that's where the pocket opens. And you think to the Erdegaard zone, right, where he finishes off those moves.
Awesome.
That's coming from what we're doing in terms of pushing the back line closer and closer to the goalkeeper and finding that space. So I think he's alluding to how if we had someone like Gyökeres who can do that job of pushing the line deeper to open up the space for Havertz. Yeah, I mean, I guess that could work. Again, I don't know too much about Gyökeres. I don't know how much of a channel threat or how much running power he has, but if he has those qualities, then yeah, sure, that could work. And Havertz, as you allude to, being very good, we know very good at finding space in the box. It is definitely something that could work. But I do want an Osimhen for sure, and I actually do like Isak as well. Those two options are, but they do excite me. Yeah. But actually, I am a massive Havertz centre forward fan, and I think there's a lot of potential there. So honestly, if you told me what's bigger priority, a centre forward or a winger, I'd say there should be a lot more priority on the winger. I think Havertz centre forward. There's a lot of that. I think he's very underrated there, and I really want him to keep getting a lot of minutes there, continuity. I mean, when we're going to the Etihad, he has to play centre forward. He has to play centre forward. You know, we've seen it in the Community Shield. We saw it at the Emirates as well when he came on. The impact that he's had in that role against the big teams. So yeah, I do see a lot of potential of Havertz playing centre forward.
Yeah.
I think Havertz's success at centre forward has kind of made me more of the opinion that if our summer transfer window was us getting, like a Nico Williams, or I think I'm off the Pedro Neto train because of his injury history. But if we went and got a really good winger, someone who could play on both sides, or at least spell Saka on right wing and put in really excellent performances there, and then we went and grabbed a Musiala or someone in midfield of that caliber, and then of course a center back signing and a couple other things here and there. I think I'd be willing to live with that over the big Osimhen or Isak or Šeško signing at center forward, because I mean I'm beginning to kind of agree with what you've put forward there, Rohan.
Also, just really quickly as well, on the centre forward Havertz point, you obviously had a really good video on it with it.
Thank you.
You need to check that out. It's a quality video that gives a good understanding of his qualities. Yeah,
we'll add it in the description of this video right after we're done.
I think like I said in the video, I just think Havertz's Ramdorter qualities are really good, but he's not a stereotypical Ramdorter, right? Because those guys, their only thing really is exploiting that space, whereas Havertz has a lot to offer off the ball as well, in terms of his physicality and his ability to run the channels, and just his why am I forgetting the word? His body frame, right? You can give him the ball, and most of the time he can hold it up against opposition center backs, and he's good in link up play. He has all those abilities to be a really successful striker. So if that is the direction that we wanted to go in, more and more with every passing Havertz performance at center forward, I'm beginning to be of the opinion that we could sacrifice the big center forward signing to, add something on the wings and add something in midfield, and then maybe get a Joral Heto or a Diomande, or if he's available for a non-ridiculous price. Apparently,
Holding.
Upamecano.
Did you say Holding?
Holding. So yeah,
No, Holding can stay at Palace. No, Upamecano. Apparently, there's reports that Upamecano might want to leave Bayern. So something like that, I think would also be just as good of a summer. So,
and speaking of Havertz centre forward against Saliba very soon today. That'll be interesting.
it's gonna be a
Yeah,
fun
it's
one.
at 8:00. Yeah, so that'll be.
Saliba playing? Is he
But they
starting?
better be. I think he's playing. Maybe I might have made that up actually.
Out of excitement, but let's see.
Yeah, but I know
no.
Havertz is centre forward though for Germany.
Yeah, Havertz is
Yeah.
starting.
This guy doesn't. He's playing fucking
Oh,
Kunde and Pavard over Saliba. Oh, come on, man.
That's center
okay,
back.
it's fine. Upamecano versus Havertz. Upamecano and Pavard versus Havertz.
Why
He'll be-
Pavard over Saliba? Like, based on what? Like, what
It's
the
alright,
hell?
Good, you're right. It's fine. It's fine. He's coming back home, fresh, ready for the running.
True, but I also want him to be happy, with his national.
And also, Havertz gets to get a practice run at Upamecano before the 2 legs. So
For the two
that
Gonna
might
legs,
play
be
him
interesting.
twice in the next 3 weeks. Gonna be interesting.
Well, so we have that game coming up in about 20 minutes now. So let's end with this topic, which is, we've had a couple contract extensions recently. Obviously, we've talked about the significance of the White extension and kind of the savviness of when it was announced. But more recently, Takehiro Tomiyasu's contract extension has been announced, and I believe it's a 2+1 deal, meaning that the base of it runs until 2026, and then we have an option to extend until 2027. I'm pretty sure I have that right. So I think that's a really interesting deal. But Sash, I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on that extension, whether or not it's a smart idea, or whether you want to keep Tomiyasu at the club long term. So yeah, what's your take?
The thing is, players like that are really hard to find. I think Rohan explained beautifully all of Tomiyasu's qualities, and how good he is defensively, and maybe 1v1, he's better than like our other fullbacks defensively, apart from Timber, as he mentioned. So I think obviously a very good player to have in the squad. I do think though personally that he's better as a left back than as a right back. Like, I know against United last season he locked Rashford, but I don't know what it is, whether it's his body shape, I don't know what it is, but somehow at right back in possession he looks a bit awkward to me. But whereas at left back he looks more natural, and even I think those runs he's making from the half space, like he did for the goal we scored against Man City, I think he gives us a real dimension playing in that position, inverting when he has to, also using that half space. So I think even Martinelli plays pretty well when Tomiyasu is playing that. So I would personally keep him for that left back spot, not just to close out a game, but also if we have a very specific winger that we're up against who's really good, like 1v1, I would still keep him there. So the thing is also, like, some of these wingers like Sane and Salah, they're left-footed, and typically most of these guys like to come inside. And I don't think Tomiyasu is right-footed, but I think you can say his body shape is sort of like how a right-footer would be, but it can also be left. So he's like ambipedal, I think that's the word. So he's able to orient himself in a very good way. And I think that's a huge advantage for us, because a player who's naturally able to go like towards the right hand side when a winger's cutting in, he's able to like stop him. And we saw it against Salah. We even saw Arteta doing this against Mahrez in the FA Cup semi-final, when he put Maitland-Niles at left back to stop Mahrez. So I think that is an advantage there. We saw Mourinho doing it with Azpilicueta in 2014, where Chelsea won the league with Azpilicueta as the left back. So I think having a player like that has its uses. He can also play as a centre back, as we know. I think the only concern are like the injury issues. But if Tomiyasu wasn't injury prone, maybe, I don't know, he might want to maybe move on and play for another club, because he's good enough to start for like top 6 clubs in the Serie A, for example, right? So it's hard to keep a player who's not playing regularly. But the fact that Tomiyasu is happy to extend his contract, I think it's a very good thing. And I would always want to keep a player like that. Like of course, sometimes it's good to keep a player like El Neni at the club, as a long-standing association. But it would also help if he could contribute on the football pitch, right? And Tomiyasu is contributing on the football pitch and he's happy to stay. The one caveat here are the injury issues. But if he's playing less, let's hope that he can shake some of these issues off. And I think it's about how we use him. And again, it ties back into the points both of you made about, I guess, rotation. I think specific players, you have to be extra careful. Tomiyasu, Thomas Partey as well. Like, I think Partey could play a big role in this run-in, but it's about how you manage these players. And yeah, I'm really pleased that we're keeping a player like Tomiyasu at the club. And yeah, I'm sure he's going to be a really good squad player for us. And we were speaking about drop-offs. Rohan spoke about Koscielny getting injured. The last time we faced Bayern, it was just 2-0 with Koscielny, but then we conceded another 8 without him. But I think having guys like Tomiyasu in the squad prevents that huge drop-off that we saw happen before. It's not going to happen again. So very pleased with this news. And yeah, only positive things to say about him. But what do you make of it, Sham? And also you, Rohan?
Yeah, I think here's the thing, right? I love Tomiyasu as a player. I have been a little concerned based on his lack of availability over the last couple seasons, but I'm very hesitant to call him injury prone. I still kind of think that we've just been unlucky. That being said, I think the 2+1 deal is really smart by Arsenal, right? Because I think it gives us, just a little bit more time to decide if this is a guy that we want to hitch our wagon to long term, right? To see whether or not he can overcome those injury issues. And in either case, right, if we take next season to really make a decision on that, we can activate that last year of the deal, which gives us another 2 years to either extend his contract again or, sell him next summer and recoup some value for him. Because, Bayern were interested in him just in January, right? So there will be teams who value him and want his quality on their side. That being said, like you said, I think he's probably our best left back option currently. That obviously changes depending on teams that we come up against, but I think I like him the best at left back against in a vacuum. And he can play across the entire front four, like both of you guys have said. I think he's probably the backup for Saliba at right center back. That is, if you're not willing to shift White over from right back and play Tomiyasu there. He can just offer us a lot. And he's a guy who, like you said, Sash, prevents that drop off from starter to Tomiyasu if he was to fill in for anybody in the back four. So he's an extremely useful player to have. Really, really talented player, really good athletic profile. It's just he's got to stay on the pitch, and that's the main concern. So, like I said, I think we've handled it really well, and if he can show that he's available, then I think we have someone who can really be an asset to the club moving forward. But Rohan, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think both of you have said it really well. And I think, Mikel Arteta gets a lot of, not criticism, but a lot of people question why we consistently buy defenders every single year, every single window. But it's because we are trying to ensure that drop-off is not significant. If you go all the way back to Mikel Arteta's first full season at Arsenal during the Villarreal period, where we lost Kieran Tierney, and during that business end of the season, and we weren't able to adapt quick enough. Then the following season, we lost Tierney again, and we had injuries to the likes of White and Gabriel. White, in particular, who was playing on literally one leg. That Newcastle game immediately springs to mind, of course. And then the season before, obviously losing Saliba and Tomiyasu. We keep buying defenders because we want to make sure that our build-up is as strong as it can be, so that the dynamics of the team remains intact. And Tomiyasu, he is our Swiss Army knife. He's very much our James Milner in the sense of he is not a... If everyone picks a starting 11, your best starting 11 for Arsenal, Tomiyasu is not necessarily going to be in it. And that's fine. He doesn't need to be. What he is a very good profile that allows you to combat different game states. And I agree with you. At right back, he doesn't offer you the same threat down the wide areas than a Ben White. He doesn't offer you the same crossing technique, variety of crossing than a Ben White. But what he does give you at right back is when you're looking to close a game off, like that Manchester United game, where there's not an onus on him to give us as much quality in forward areas, but to be that guy who's going to be part of your rest defense and give you security and lock down the right-hand side. Tomiyasu is going to give you that quality. centre back, central centre back, left centre back, right centre back. He gives you that because of what Sasha alluded to and what you alluded to as well, Sham, in terms of his ambipedal nature. Very good off both feet. That allows him to be unpredictable in build up. And I actually think Tomiyasu at centre back, that could perhaps prevent the number of injuries that he can pick up because of the amount of running that he wouldn't necessarily need to do if he was playing right back. The role that Ben White plays, there requires so much running power and so much intensity. Maybe that has had a part in Tomiyasu's injuries over the years. But at centre back, you look at what Tomiyasu's best qualities are. It's transition control, it's build-up quality, it's duels, box defending. Those are essential 1v1 defending, as we already mentioned. Those are essential qualities to operate at centre back in an Arteta system, and he gives you that. And for me, he's only played there. He's only started at centre back once under Arsenal, and that was against Brentford this season in the cup. And for me, he was man of the match. He was fantastic. And left back, as Sasha alludes to, he gives you different quality, and again another 1v1 specialist. So he just offers you so much in different areas. And like you mentioned, I think the contract is saying we rate you, Tomiyasu, but we don't rate you enough to give you a 3 or 4 year contract because you need to prove us your availability. So it's quite smart from Arsenal because, one, it gives them a bit more time with Tomiyasu because they rate the player, and obviously given he's a unique profile, and also it gives us the chance of being able to retain his value in the sense of if he isn't able to do better on the availability front, we can sell him next year for still a good price because he would still have 2 years remaining in the following summer. So all in all, it's a really good deal for all parties. I was very happy that we didn't give him a 3 or 4 year deal. I was very happy with the 2+1. So he's so important for the running, particularly in those games to close them off if we're in front.
I like how Rohan assumed that it's just Arsenal that gave Tomiyasu the contract. Maybe the player also said, "Oh no, I don't want to sign for this club for more than 2 or 3 years."
That's true. That's true. Yeah,
also being the other way, but yeah.
I think that's possible. I think it's definitely more likely that they were negotiating and that was the contract that Arsenal wanted to offer. But yeah, I mean, we'll see. It's when I think of Tomiyasu, there's actually a couple of Arsenal players this applies to, but Tomiyasu is one of them who, when I think of him, I think of that Stephen A. Smith quote where he says, the best ability is availability, and availability leads to reliability. And if you ain't available, you ain't reliable. And that's kind of what comes to mind whenever I think of Tomiyasu. So yeah, if he can stay fit and justify that contract, again, excellent asset for the club. Another one of those, I think, brilliant signings that Arteta has achieved in his time as Arsenal manager. And we'll see what happens there. But I think we've run on for long enough. We're coming up on 80 minutes. And Rohan, I know you want to watch the France-Germany game.
I'm looking forward to Kai Havertz session.
Me as well. Gonna cook.
If he scores, I want to see tweets from both of you. We're cooking.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. But yeah, Rohan, thanks so much for coming on. I wish we'd had time for you to kind of talk about your article, but what I'm going to do is, because I know there's about 3,000 of you watching right now, so I'm going to share this right underneath Sash's tweet. Go check out Rohan's article if you haven't already. It is absolutely phenomenal. It is a great dissection of the evolution of what we've done off the ball against Liverpool, against Manchester City. Really do encourage you to check that out. And you can follow Rohan at RJ Arsenal Blog. You can also catch him on TDK Live with the one and only Alexander Moneypenny. Again, always a great show. I'll see you in the comments next week, hopefully. And as always, you can follow me at Shamsdale. You can follow Sash at LT Arsenal. You can follow the pod at This Week Arsenal. If you're watching on YouTube, please do like, comment, and subscribe. Ring that notifications bell button, both. If you're listening to this on Spotify and Apple, please do leave us a review. Give us 5 stars. That's really helpful. It's also apparently how people find new podcasts these days. So with all that being said, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to us chatter about Arsenal. And it's been a really, really fun discussion. And we will catch you next time, hopefully, after we continue to have a nice and peaceful international break. So until then, don't be a goon, be a gooner, and we will talk to you soon. So until then, take care. Bye-bye.
Maybe we'll have a good surprise for you.
Right.